Thank you for tuning in to Three Minds, One Mic. It's the regular folk talk show podcast where we talk with regular folks about their opinions and perspectives on life and current events. With me always is Anthony and Radu, and we're glad that you tuned in. Hi, and welcome again. Good to see you all here. You know who we are, and another exciting episode because we do have another guest that's hanging on with us, and we're going to introduce him in a moment. But super excited. I got a couple other guests lined up. We're going to have Wesley back on. I did talk to him. We're probably going to try and do something this week, and then George, I think for sure too, because they're kind of open this week. So we might do two shows if you guys are open. I didn't actually talk to you about this, but we can talk about that later. And see if we can maybe get 2 recordings in. And that's what's cool about this is we can record this stuff and cut out and edit and stuff like that too. So, but I want to get down to this show right away. Today we have with us Tom. This is someone that I met a while ago when I was working in apartments, and I was a maintenance guy. He was a resident, and we just talked about all kinds of different things, and it was really a joy to get to know this young man. I was going to say something else, but I forgot. So let us bring Tom on, and we're just going to talk with Tom and get to know him.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys being accommodating for my schedule. Gets a little busy work week, and then with my kiddos, shared custody, so it changes every now and again. So again, I appreciate it. My name's Tom Stoker. Yeah, we met years ago, Pearl Spring Creek. Still there. It's still doing good. I don't live there anymore. I actually live out in Rio Rancho. I lived in Albuquerque for quite a few years. I'm a transplant. I'm originally from Maine. I joined the Army at 17, left, was at Fort Hood, did 8 years in the military. I did about 5 in active duty, then did the reserves out here. Was going to school for originally petroleum engineering, decided I like nuclear better, then some family stuff happened where some health issues back home, took a semester off. In the meantime, I did a double major in economics and political science because turns out calculus is the beginning of engineering, and the highest I ever went in high school was Algebra 2. So in the meantime, while I was chipping away at that degree, I knocked out a couple other degrees. I have a few associates. Found my love for learning and education, and still do that. Still looking at different degrees that I could do eventually, once the timing is right and funding is also right. But I also have an MBA with a couple concentrations: strategic management, policy, and operations management. So,
a
few different
quite accredited.
A little bit. I always feel like I know how to get places in conversations and in research. I won't say that I'm a subject matter expert on any of those fields,
right?
Because there's always more to learn. There's always something that somebody else has thought of that you haven't, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So I can talk about a wide variety of things. So whatever you guys want to ask me about, feel free. And then, yeah.
Right on. Well, yeah. I mean, so like you said, you have the hustle and bustle of life. You got shared custody, you got jobs, you got education, you got your kids' education, you got like so many things going on in the world right now. And even that alone, I mean, these stressors that we all experience in life kind of add to a lot of friction, that can happen in life too. So I want to know like some of the things you do. Because for me, and I've talked about this before on other episodes, it's I have my God that I lean on, and I pray, and I go to Jesus, and I do those things, and they really do help me. And I know everybody has something different, you know what I mean? And so other people just kind of engulf themselves in their community that they have, their family, their friends, whatever they have, or however they do it. And I just want to know, what do you do to kind of cope with those things on top of all the stressors, on top of everything else that's got you going in life? What do you do when you're like at the and then some kind of external conflict is coming your way that you have nothing to do with? How do you How do you kind of handle that? How do you stop the crap from coming in? Short question.
Great question. Yeah. So I've had my own mental health journey. So I myself am not religious. One of my favorite courses in school was Living World Religions. Had to study it, had to write papers, present on every religion. I was raised Christian loosely, but then eventually when we moved to a different part of Maine, just kind of fell away from it and just never picked it back up. The more I researched, the more I was comfortable without having a religion, which is, something I still love talking about. I never try to approach it in a way that I'm trying to persuade or talk down about any religions. I understand people's need and purpose for them. I just don't see the need or purpose for myself. So how I've approached things over these years, and more recently over the past several years, it's just been my own mental health journey of like how I was raised and how I was brought up. So I've been honest with myself about what my faults are, and how I can better parent my kids the way that I needed things when I was their age. I have a high schooler and I have a first grader, so quite the age gap, and
Right.
just trying to navigate that, I think, has been a great. You'd think a great stressor, but it's actually something that's very distressing for me, because I get
Oh,
to help them in ways that I didn't actually get to help,
nice.
right? And
Okay.
teaching them tools that I had to develop later on, like as an adult, versus learning those as a kid. So they both have no issues with counseling. They've done counseling. Like they have no problem with like. I mean, it's still ebb and flow with
Yeah.
accountability and stuff, but they're way better off, you know, mentally and emotional awareness and stuff like that than I was at their age, for damn sure.
Good.
So I
And
think that
that's
knowing that they're getting set up is one of the things that actually makes me feel better.
right.
And I do work out. See my treadmill in the back. I also ebb and flow with it, and I get into it really well for like a couple weeks, and then I kind of fall out of it. Depends on the time of year, you know. But
How it goes sometimes.
yeah,
No kidding. And you can't. I mean, it's hard to do anything all the time. So the fact that you get back up, keep going, is what matters the most, I think. But it's interesting. You're because that's exactly what we want to do as parents, right? Is give our kids better than what we had.
yeah,
And a lot of people think it's material stuff, and they forget all the emotional need they needed as a child that they didn't get that they can give their kid now. And I think you really hit on something that I'm not sure if a lot of parents understand that because they look at it and like, I don't want my kid to experience the hardship. I don't want my kid to experience this, and they usually like bad things, but at the same time, life, you have to learn how to kind of bob and weave those things as well. So sounds like you're super aware of what you're passing along to your kids, and even I'm sure that goes a lot with how you act in front of them as well, because we know that kids learn more from watching than they do from just listening.
yeah, yeah. And I know my parents did the best that they could with
Right.
the information and tools that they had. Because I've done counseling and all that stuff, and it was funny when I started it and I told my mom about it. She was like, "Is it because of me?" I was like, "Well, there's."
Is it good? That's great.
so so yeah, there's just different aspects to it, but you're right. We definitely want to make sure that our kids are better off for that, and they are still spoiled, but there's. But I mean, teenagers learn the hard way, as I did. So
Yeah, I think we all do. I think that's
yeah,
I mean, if we can learn vicariously, there would be like no use for so much stuff in the world. But
right.
we have to learn the hard way. So that's all right though. Builds character, I think. That's what I tell myself anyway. Um, what is that? Is that it doesn't sound like static. What's that background noise going on your end?
Oh, sorry, it's the fan from my computer.
Oh, okay.
I just shut it off.
I,
Or it's actually my internal fan for my computer. My computer is a 2015 Apple MacBook Pro, so it's still moving along 10 years
No
later.
checking.
But
nice.
it does warm up. So the fan inside of it, is it too loud? Do I need to switch
No, not at
devices?
all.
Oh,
Honestly, I was trying to make a segue to the noise thing that we were talking about with the brown noise, and I thought that's what it was, to be honest. So yeah.
oh, okay. Well played. Well played. I messed it up.
Segue. No, you didn't. Not at all. I didn't cue you right, so that's on me.
Yeah.
That's
So,
awesome.
what do you want to talk about with the noise?
Yeah, so you were saying you like brown noise better than white noise, and
Mhm.
I know we had touched that it does a little something for the mind, and tell us why. What's the difference that you know of?
Well, I mean, just in general, for me, I find it more calming and soothing. It's more of a deeper static than white noise.
Okay.
If we want to go into the weeds on some stuff, we can talk about all the different sciences behind sound and
And
different
frequencies, right? Yeah.
frequencies and stuff.
That'd be cool.
Right? So
Yeah, it would.
there's a lot of health benefits to it. And right now, like recently in the past like 2 years, they're even trying to use it to fight like cancer and tumors and stuff like that. So, but that's
I've heard.
also, if you want to go down some deep rabbit holes, that was stuff that someone invented back in like the 1920s, I believe. And the American healthcare industry had just come together and then called it pseudoscience and shut it down. But it was
Right.
actually the University of New Hampshire, I believe. I'll have to look it up, but they just did it 2 years ago or a year ago, where they actually. So the theory is
Oh,
that
great.
everything is vibrating. Everything has a frequency. So that's why, like, depending on whether it's white noise, brown noise, black noise, purple noise, blue noise, green noise, there's going to be something that matches your brain wavelengths in a better way than what matches mine. And of course, there's going to be people who feel that, there's similarities as well. But with the back to the frequency, every part of your body, everything around us has frequency. And so what this gentleman did back in the day was he actually fine-tuned some devices that he had created to determine what the frequency is of healthy cells, because again, it's different for your pancreas than your lungs to your epidermis. So those are all different as well, and he was able to pinpoint what they all were, and so he could then figure out even what the frequency was of like a tumor. And so he could go
Wow.
in and just target the tumor. And because you're playing that frequency that's only for that one, like even if you were to accidentally expand it and hit healthy tissue, it has no impact on the healthy tissue at all. And so again, this was something that was
That's
done
amazing.
a long time ago. But again, one of the research universities, there's only a handful in the US, because we have tons of hospitals, but only a few of them are actually attached to universities. Like here in New Mexico, we have UNM and UNMH. It's the only level 1 trauma center for our Southwest region. So,
No kidding. That's awesome. I didn't know that.
yeah. Yeah, so if there's an incident that happens on lower southern Colorado, eastern Arizona, or even some places in El Paso, north of El Paso, like they'll be life flighted into our level 1 trauma center here in Albuquerque.
That's fun. Oh wow. See, and I look at New Mexico, and I've always thought we were a little backwards on some things, but I understand we also have like a top
We
notch
are.
cancer. Like, yeah, we are on a lot of things, right? But we got like top notch heart care,
Mhm.
cancer care. Now, one of the research hospitals you were just saying with that, and so it seems like we have these really high end specialized medical areas
Yeah.
and the labs, and that's kind of it.
It actually helped my dad out when he came out years ago after his health stuff, and he's had numerous ablations to his heart. None of them have worked, but he came. I'm originally from Maine, so when they came out, they flew, and so they're sea level, or at some places they're even below sea level, and then they come out here to this incredibly high elevation, And it ended up one day we actually had to take him into the local heart hospital because we have a heart hospital dedicated just to cardiac stuff.
Right.
And um, took him in there, and they were able to get him sorted out like right away. And because the oxygen is thinner up here, it impacted his heart because it was making his heart work harder than back at sea level. It's actually the same reason why athletes do this as well. Like, so football players will go train in high elevation areas, so that way when they go and play a game at like in Florida or something, then they'll be even faster and move and be
Right.
even stronger because
Better cardio and stuff.
yeah, yep,
Yeah, I was heard that kind of gave the Broncos almost an edge because they had the higher altitude training all the time, and
yeah.
you get some of the sea level guys come out and play them and just hurt.
Yeah, so they've been back since, but they actually got an RV and drove all the way here from Maine. So that way it was a
Wow.
nice, slow, gradual increase.
Easing into
instead of
it.
just stepping onto a plane and then
That's
being in
awesome.
high altitude. Yeah. But yeah,
Well,
so the frequency stuff is amazing. That's actually, there's a lot of belief that ancient structures in India and in different Asian countries, like they were built to look like sound structures. So if you were to take a plate, there's at Explorer you can do this. Is it Explorer? One of the cool like science learning places. It might be in Santa Fe, but they have a metal sheet, and then you just put sand on it, and then you can play different sound frequencies, and it makes different shapes.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in some of those, if you actually have an aerial view of some of those ancient structures, they look very similar to what sounds would be like. So it's pretty cool. So I think we're
That is very
discovering a
cool.
lot more about sounds as we dig into our past.
Mm-hmm.
Let me touch on one of the conspiracies with that, if I may. Yeah, they're saying that even the bells, that's why they removed a lot of bells, because there used to be bells alerting everybody time wise and other things attached to cathedrals and other, the town bell or whatever. And now they're taking out all the bells because they want people healing upright or using sound to heal. So that's a conspiracy. That's why all the bells are gone.
Yeah, yeah, because that would
Yeah,
be
but that's why they had them.
similar
That's
in
why they
line
had 'em.
with what we were talking about earlier with the machines that they're using right now, like at the universities, to zap out with frequency a tumor. So this patient had a tumor, I believe, on their kidney, and they were able to use frequency to get rid of the tumor without harming the kidney. And again, this was just like 2 years ago, I believe.
Wow.
So they, but we use it in warfare as well. Like we
Yeah.
know, like we've had sonic weapons for quite some time. Like keep in mind, anything you see like it being actively used by our military in the public sphere has probably been around for at least 20 to 40 years.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We've gathered that for sure. And I think microwaves too. Microwaves started off, well, didn't start off, but they weaponized that, I'm sure, and then gave it
Mm-hmm.
to the public to use. So I'm sure, yeah, many unseen things can be used as weapons, and we figure out ways to weaponize them. Our human nature, I think.
Yeah,
It definitely seems like it.
we
So,
excel at it. That's for sure.
yeah, and I don't know. I think I'm finding out now. I'm almost 50. I'm pushing 50 years old, and I'm figuring out that giving life and putting life into people, not giving life like I give birth, but um, putting life into people and pouring life into people is just way more satisfying and gratifying, lifting people up. And I've kind of always been that way. People think I'm naive because I'm so positive, or I try to be so positive. But man, I don't, I'm not naive. I work hard at it and I enjoy it. I really do. I'd rather do that. And I think most of us do. I think most of us do, as opposed to putting people down.
Yeah.
But you see the people that get their hands on stuff, and you see the people in power, and it's like, would that change me? Would I become someone that would look differently on people than I do now? And I really think that I would. Yeah, I do.
You would change or you wouldn't change?
I think I might. I don't know about now changing, but like 20 years ago, if I was given like a bunch of wealth or a bunch of power, I think it definitely would have went to my head pretty quick. But I think I'm hoping I'm fairly grounded enough right now that if any of that did happen, it wouldn't change me all that much. You know what I mean? Like, because I've seen it where I've had a few, a little bit of money in the bank before, and that starts becoming my focus. It's like keeping that level up there and keeping that amount there, and it's like I could see if it was a much larger amount that would have taken a lot more focus, and people wouldn't mean a whole lot to me. You know what I mean? And yeah, so I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be finding ways to exploit. You know what I mean? I'd be finding ways to exploit and take advantage and see, any other way I can usurp power
Do you
or
think that's like a
finances or whatever.
systemic thing, or is that like a personal thing?
I think both. I mean, I think it's a personal thing. I think it's a trait, like any other kind of thing, and how it's nourished is how it's going to grow or not. But I think if I was maybe guided that way in my growing up, and I think our system is available more for that purpose than other purposes. If that makes sense. I mean, we're a capitalist system, and capitalizing is you capitalize on people. You capitalize on ways. You create ways to sell something. You know what I mean? You create a need, you fill a need. You see a need, you fill a need. That's capitalism. We do that, and I think it does set up. I think it does set things up to be
Yep.
like that.
The only thing I'd add to that, see a need, fill a need. I would say that's more of I would not want to tie that to a capitalistic mindset, because the capitalistic mindset is you see the need, you fill the need, but then you profit off of it. Capitalism is about profit. It's not about like
Okay.
me. So if you are actually see a need, fill a need, and that's like what's driving you because you're actually trying to help people.
Right.
You might not charge anything for it. You might actually, like just do it for the goodness of helping others. So
Right.
that's why I wouldn't
I was
want to.
talking about just the ability to exploit that.
Yeah.
That ability to exploit that see a need, fill a need is there because of
Mhm.
capitalism. As opposed to just we would do it, help your neighbor kind of a thing, because hopefully that's what normal people do, like the regular majority of people do. I don't know. You know what I mean? There's outliers everywhere, but I
Yeah.
think there's an average as
Yeah.
well.
So I think that, that we are systemic in the sense that even if you wanted to be someone that was generous and see a need and fill a need, you have to realize the system that you're in. And so it makes it much more difficult. I mean, Shark Tank is a perfect example where you just have some of the richest people around, like just playing with their money because they just, I mean, it's just disposable income for them. It means nothing. They could take it out and burn it if they wanted to,
Mhm.
and it still wouldn't even hurt them. But when they talk to people on the show and they're barely going to make a profit, 9 times out of 10, the Sharks aren't interested because they're seeing a need, filling a need. But the
Right.
Sharks are like, well, we don't care about that. We want to maximize our gains,
Right.
And if you're not gonna like work, because there's one that recirculates every now and again on social media. A farmer out of Florida, he created a kind of like a halo system that goes around the base of a tree. So that way, because I don't know if you know about like a lot of farming techniques, but we still do it this way here in New Mexico, where you flood the plant. Like so, if you have pinon trees or anything like that, you're flooding the whole field, and then letting what doesn't absorb in run back into the water streams, so it can go down to the next farmer. Like so,
Oh wow.
they would also do that
Okay.
in Florida where they would flood the field, but it was like, well, this is a huge waste of water, not to mention, all the potential minerals or toxins, what have you, that are on your topsoil are now going into the waterway.
Funneling.
So the water's not always brown. If you go further up north, like it's not brown, but once it hits the farmlands, and because that's how we farm, like it eventually like does turn the water from clear to the brown. So
Which makes sense.
what he did was make a halo type thing that goes around the base of it. and only one of the sharks, he was actually a guest shark, um, he actually supported it because he was like, because all the other ones were like, you need to charge the prices higher. You need to up those prices, or else we're not like, if we buy in, we want you to increase the prices. And he was like, the gentleman, the inventor was like, I, you're talking to farmers. Like these are like family farms. Like they can't afford those prices. And so they all backed out except for this one guest shark who wanted to actually invest in it because he thought it was the right thing to do. And he made marginal profit, but not the big gains like all the other ones wanted.
Right.
So,
And the capitalism is definitely maximizing the gains, not because I think even small business owners start off with just wanting to make their way. You know what I mean? They're not trying to just
mhm.
bankrupt the system and take over everything. They just want to make their own living on their own terms, doing what they love. So I think you're
Yeah,
absolutely right. The maximizing of the gains is what separates. Huh. So yeah, I think it would change me. I mean, I believe in the saying, power
yeah,
corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Um, and I just think that's. I mean, you can even we can kind of see that. Now I'm taking that from the man is flawed, man is broken, the original sin kind of stuff, the mentality of pridefulness. But even evolutionary, it's the leader of the pack. He's the one that rises up for being the strongest, smartest, whatever. You know what I mean? And then eventually they get overthrown because someone could do it better. And then it becomes that battle of power, that battle of, and I think we've always been that way as a species. Regardless of where our creation or our genesis is, our beginning.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we definitely try to. There's been different points throughout history where we've had different civilizations work together, but it's all based out of fear, right?
Right.
So if you fear is an amazing tool because it's quick and easy, um, and I don't see amazing tool as in like I love it. Amazing tool as in like how efficient it can be
It's
and
effective.
spreading, right? Because the other things are tools too, like hope and trying to actually use the truth, but those take a longer road. You know, if you can paint things as black and white, then it makes it much easier to get things done. But
Right.
anybody, that has existed for at least, a little while, knows that there is no such thing as black and white. It's thousands of shades of gray. Um, when I talk to people in the community, what I'm trying to do is try to bridge these divides as well. Is when you think of Lady Justice, she only has two scales, right and wrong, right? But that is
Right.
so deceiving because that's not even how our laws are built. So even murder, like you'd think murder is the most black and white thing that we have, and it's not, because taking somebody else's life, there's multitudes of laws that go into the weeds on that. Was it self-defense? Was it a crime of passion? Was it first degree, second degree, third degree? So like
So black and white,
that
right?
that's not even black and white. So anybody that's trying to paint you a picture when they're trying to implement laws or come up with some type of solution where they're just making it watered down and so simple as black and white, I would not trust that. I would
Right.
immediately start asking questions, because nothing is black and
Right.
Agreed.
And that's very true. Very true. Unless you're a Sith, because only Sith deals in absolutes. So
Right.
white. There you go.
even that's an absolute, though, by saying that only Sith deals in absolutes. I don't really know how that works. There's some gray matter in that Jedi as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And that's I've said that before too. It's like you look at the surface of something, a cab driver, or truck driver, or an accountant, or it's like, oh, they work with numbers, they do, but there's so much. Everything goes so deep because it's just like you said. There's so many gray. There's so many shades of gray in there that you just see the surface of it, and sometimes it does look black and white. And I think that's what
Yeah.
appeals to the masses too. You know what I mean? Because we go to work, we do our thing, we make our living. We get tired and we're done. And then somebody's like, here's the easy choice. It's black or it's white. And I'm like, all right, let me take that black choice. Let me take that white choice, not really realizing everything that's gone into even presenting that choice to you in the first place, and then
Yeah.
making that choice.
That's very true. And there's also another aspect to it as well that has popped up over the past like 10, 15 years is, where people just try to say things and then not back it up, or say, well, you go Google it, or, like debate me. Like they just say
Right.
something off the wall, and then they're just like, that is not how anything of value actually comes to fruition. That's also not how the medical world works, engineering, science in general, our laws. Like if you go into a court of law and you just say, well, he did it, and then and then you're like, you have to prove me wrong. That's not how that works. Like you have to show evidence as to why you believe that that person or this statement or this medical device is going to be the way that you claim that it is. So I think that's another big issue that we're having is there are simple black and white things that happen or are portrayed as black and white. Another way that I like to explain it to people is also like if you've seen Shrek, the onions, like
The
you peel
layers.
back the layers of, everything's layered and everything goes back much further than everyone realizes, right? But when you try to talk to people about this stuff, you got to figure out where they're coming from. Like, how far back did they know? You know, so that way
Right.
you can potentially help that conversation along. So because a lot of people don't know about like the Magna Carta, that type of stuff. Like how we got to be as a nation. So it makes it difficult when they think like maybe this is the first time this has ever happened where peasants stuck it to a king. It's not true. There
Nope.
was numerous times prior to that, which is how we were able to justify how we did what we did. Because even in the court systems, we were granted our stability and to be left alone was through those different mechanisms. So,
Right.
so yeah, so knowledge is power for sure, and
And ignorance is
and
bliss.
restricting access to knowledge is also power. So you will see
It
that
is.
where a lot of people,
Oh, yeah.
their stuff is restricted. Propaganda is a major tool.
Dude, isn't it? Like, I think I'm hoping, and it really seems like more and more people are realizing that than ever before, as in my generation. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
just not taking for face. Because I remember in the 80s, I grew up in the 80s that I remember. That's as far back as I can remember, and Reagan and even some adults. Just, it didn't seem like the government didn't seem so. I think the government's evil. I'm going to put it out there. I think our government is evil. I think the world governments are evil. I think they promise all kinds of stuff, get us hopeful, and then just pull the carpet out from us every time and keep running the world the way they always have. I
Yeah.
feel like the families that have run this world for millennia are still the ones in control, just passed down. And we can go back. I mean, if you got some knowledge on how far back that goes, I've heard of the Magna Carta before, but I just found out a little bit about it and Article 61, but it was like back in 1215 was when
Yeah.
this came out. And
Long
Article
time ago. Yeah.
61 is about the people. If the essentially in our vernacular, if you take Congress, if Congress is seeing that somebody's doing something wrong, the president's doing something wrong, or if anybody in the House sees that anybody in Congress is doing wrong or the leaders are doing wrong, they can get them the hell out of there and tie up their and freeze their everything until it's made right, until things were made right. And I'm very much paraphrasing. I'm sure Tom can
Technically,
probably elaborate on that a lot better. So
it's
if
much
you would
more
like to, yeah,
difficult now.
please.
Well, it's more difficult now. So as of 2024, what ended up happening is the Supreme Court ruled they changed the definition of bribery. So it used to
In
be,
2024,
yeah, yeah. So there
that
was also another law passed
okay.
as well. So like there's two major milestones. One of the major ones for corruption in America was Citizens United, which if you guys don't know
Okay.
about that one, I can go into a little detail on that. But what that, well, I'll
Yeah,
just
I don't know much about it.
so citizen. Well, the major takeaway is because a lot of people may not realize this with how our state constitution is versus federally. So if you were to try and write a bill, the name of the bill, like just the title of a bill in New Mexico, per the state constitution, it actually has to match the intent of the bill. You can't make up a name that might mislead people. So on the federal level, not true at all. So Citizens United sounds very rosy and nice, but what's buried in there is that corporations are, money is considered free speech. And because corporations have money, corporations are also considered a human entity. So
Right.
therefore, they can use their money in elections. And then what
Okay.
also happened in there is prior to that, there wasn't a thing such as super PACs. That then created and legalized super PACs. So leading up to that, people kept saying there's dark money, and there's a bunch of different documentaries you can watch on dark money in politics. So that's just secretive money, because it used to, well, the laws were that if you were donating money, you had to actually say how much and to whom. Well,
Right.
people weren't doing that, hence the term dark money. And then people petitioned Congress enough saying that it was something that had to be addressed. And they're like, you're right, we will address this. And so they legalized it. So they turned it into Citizens United, which created super PACs, and then did away with the requirements that people had to say who they were donating to, and those requirements of a super PAC. So if you donate directly to the candidate, you still have to say how much and to whom. So, and then there's also limits, so, but if you're donating to a super PAC, there are no limits, and they do not have to disclose who their donors are.
Oh
So,
my goodness.
and then Stephen Colbert, before he was
That's
on
shady.
the Late Night Show, he did a good piece where he actually had, it was called the Colbert Report, and he actually had
Right.
like the lawyer for the show come out, and he's like, "Can I create a super PAC?" And the Colbert Show is like investigative but comedy at the same time, and similar with Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, the way that they do it, and the Daily Show, the way they still do it, right? So investigative but a comedic spin to it. And so he was allowed to create a super PAC. Then he was like, "Well, what can I buy with it?" And they were like, "As long as you can justify it for the campaign, you can spend the money on anything." And he's like, "Oh, a jet." "Well, yeah, you want to get to your campaigns faster." He's like, "What about a tiger?" And the lawyer was like, "Well, I mean, can you justify it?" And he's like, "I'm sure I could find a way." And he's like, "Well, then
Yeah.
technically you could buy a tiger with the money as well." And he's like, "Well, once it's all
Security.
done, do I have to give the money back?" And he's like, "No. Like, it's your super PAC. You do what you want with it." And so that's what was also created out of the like giving the structure, and then also less requirements to Citizens United. And so that's led to a whole bunch of different things now, where corporations, because they're human entities, can do all kinds of different things. And it's really messing up a lot of different things for us actual humans. And so that's one thing.
I'm probably missing it. I'm sorry. But when did that happen? When did they
Citizens
classify?
United was early 2000s. So that was early 2000s. So that was like the start of them becoming, I guess, more flagrant with their carelessness of actually addressing things for the citizenry.
Because now
There's
there
been
was no
numerous
cap to the
things,
bribery.
once, yeah. Well, and that leads us to now in 2024, when Supreme Court changed the ruling on um, bribes and corruption. So the bar is now higher. So you literally now need to be caught with like a bag of money. And so far, only one senator, he's actually qualified. He actually had Turkish gold bars like in his suit jacket. Like,
Oh my
so he
God.
actually got in trouble. I think it was Turkish, but it was a Democratic senator. So I mean, there was like no way around it. So like they were like, "Oh well, shit. Now we have to actually like take action." And him and his wife were both in on it, which was funny, is because they started going after each other's throats. Like once they were getting investigated.
Wow.
So that just happened,
Makes sense.
and then also in 2024, which is why you've seen the No Kings rallies, is that in 2024, the Supreme Court ruled that the president has immunity while sitting as president. So, as long as the president can justify, so this has never happened before. right? So no one is above the law. That's
Wow.
like the creed that
Until
we've
now.
always like had, right? Until 2024, the president, and this was under Biden, but there's a separation of powers, right? Like, which is different now because it doesn't really seem like there is, but there's supposed to be three branches of government, and so and that goes all the way to local government as well. So there's always,
Checks and balances, right?
yeah, exactly. And so, what the Supreme Court ruling, in a nutshell, says is that the president can commit an action. And actually, the judge, before it went to the Supreme Court, there was a lower level judge, and this made some national news as well. Is this all came about with President Trump's lawyers trying to say that, like, I think it was the 2020 election in January 6th. There was a couple things wrapped up into one, and how he can't be charged with anything because he was a sitting president at the time, and they were proposing that. Well, the judges had ruled that's not how this works, and in their language that they had proposed the structure for this new law, the sitting judge asked, "Well, what if any president, under this new ruling, would say, I'm going to activate I'm going to operate SEAL Team 6 and go after my political rivals. Could they do that?" And they're like, in theory, yes. And
Wow.
so
Wow.
that judge struck it down. They appealed. It went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of it. So what it says is that, in a nutshell, is that a president can commit an act, and if anyone has an issue with it, they can then, raise their hand. And it has to be, the judicial branch or like members of Congress, and then it goes through a process to a low-level court on the judicial side to say, well, did he do this, or did this president do this out of their own self-interest, or did they do it because of national security for the country? And I don't know how much you guys know about this, but like that's a very thin line,
Yeah.
so if you're a sitting president or a mayor or a governor, and like you're trying to run a reelection, or you're trying to or if you have businesses or something like that, like it's very hard to separate your personal life from your work life because you're president 24/7. There's never a time you're not president. So like,
There's no turning it off.
yeah, so it's going to be, you have to go through with it like a fine-tooth comb, but at the same time, like, you're also not going to be aware of all the information because the president could easily say, well, I was going off of some classified information that's not for the public. And then how do you do a
Prove or
check and balance,
disprove it.
right?
Right.
Like there's gray area in this new way that we are now approaching our world. So the president actually, as of 2024, is immune. They have presidential immunity. They cannot be prosecuted while sitting in office. The only check and balance of it is whether or not they can be proven they did it out of their own interest versus the country's interest. And that's it.
Right.
But that's, again, after the action is committed. The action's already done.
Right.
So then comes the checks and balances to it. Reactionary, not proactive. So those are two major changes that just happened in 2024.
Major, huge. I mean, and it sounds like 15 more layers of gray were just added to things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like make it more convoluted, more confusing to people that aren't in that loop, in that group that can, decipher those things. And so, yeah, you just got a lot more that you have to dig through now to find anything. Wow, that's interesting. So, once again, I'm a little conspiracy minded. I got my beliefs, my opinions, and that's all they are mine. But yeah, I mean, people will talk about on both sides now more than ever that Trump is trying to keep power, and he's going to try to keep power. I remember making a little comment And the thing that they talked about, like, yeah, if we're at war with someone in an active war, you can push off the election. And he made that little smirk and comment, and it's like, And with these new laws in place, I mean, it sounded like I'm going to do all kinds of stuff illegal, and then I'm going to be sitting president for a long time, at least until I die, and I don't have to ever pay for my punishment, my crimes. And I can almost see that getting set up on a conspiracy level. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
There's gray. You know what I'm saying? That's just a very,
I have my own little
very,
conspiracy with it
yeah.
as well. Yeah. No, yeah.
So
Um,
that's interesting, then. That's
I,
interesting.
I mean, he's been blunt about it. He has said that people need a ruler. He's cozied up to dictators versus those that are elected. So I
Right.
mean, he's done these things on his own free will. Like no one has set him up to do this. People have
Yeah.
actually set him up to like be friends with our allies, and he brushes them off, and then he's friends with Kim Jong Un and Putin and stuff like that. But I mean, honestly, I don't think he's the one. I think that if we do end up with someone, I think he's just the scapegoat.
Okay.
I think what's going to
That,
be his
I think
nail in
so.
the coffin is
Because
the
he's already the bad guy.
well, right. But
He's
I
already the
think
bad guy. So,
I think that the issue with him is that he does this in all of his campaigns. So he's an oddity, right? So for those of us in the political world that like with political science and stuff, the question is what's going to happen to the conservative party, the Republican Party, after he's gone? Because they've already shown that only Trump can beat Trump. Any other politician or prospective politician who's has gone to rallies and done what he did, like bringing up people's family members, they don't actually talk politics. Like when he
right.
did all of his debates, like very rarely did he stay on script and actually talk about the policy. He usually did name calling, like acted like kind of like a schoolyard bully type of thing. And then other people have tried it, and even his supporters laugh at them.
Right.
But yeah, he's in his 80s now. Like, so how is he like? What's going to happen after he's gone? Like, who are they going to cling to? So that's just a side note of like just overall like what's really going to happen to them when there's a vacuum for them because they've all
Right.
clung so tightly to how he operates, and they ridicule anybody that tries to follow him in those same mannerisms. So when he's gone, which again he's in his 80s, so you know
Right. It's not going to be long.
anytime now, right? So
I feel
that's
like they're
going to be.
prepping up JD Vance for that. They're getting conservatives on board with JD.
I think he's the ultimate one, and I just recently learned more about him as well. How this is like his fourth name change.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
he's
Freshman
he's a,
senator.
he's a bit of an opportunist, which is someone
Capitalism.
who in our system, yeah, in our system they can clown very well, but also in our system, that's the type of person you can't really trust. Because they will turn on you. I mean, look, he was the one who talked trash about Trump the most, and now he's
Yep.
the sitting vice president and sings his praises and
Yep.
talks bad about everybody else.
Very
So,
quickly things shifted.
yeah. So I think that he is going to be the next person. I don't think they're going to get an impeachment on Trump, like because that's the only way that you could actually remove the whole cabinet is if you
Right.
impeach the president and it's successful, you purge everybody that's in his cabinet. Everybody goes, and then you put the next person in charge in, which is then sits in Congress, right? But
What's something I found interesting too is even with the first election, when Trump first announced, everybody, it was like, okay, really, this guy's going to run for president. And then he was serious about it. And then for a little while, everybody was on board on the Republican side. But then shortly after that, even the Republicans started being like, wait a minute. And I see that now. I see MAGA was all excited that Trump got voted in again. And now I'm starting to see a distinction between MAGA and the conservative party. Like it's really starting to separate. Like people are starting to disassociate with MAGA that were in it, and they're still conservative. But because how far he's going, they're like, wait,
yeah,
this isn't what we signed up for. You know what I mean? And they're going back. So I think and I'm one of the belief, and this is very broad statement, but I believe it. Both sides are the same wing on the same bird, and I think they get paid by the same people. in our government, in our Congress, in our Senate. They get, those PACs and those super PACs and those IPACs and whatever other PACs they get.
Yeah.
They're all getting paid by the same folks. You know what I mean? So the same people agendas are getting pushed, regardless of who's sitting on the throne. And I think it's set up perfectly for Trump to be the bad guy and get these things in play and really push the level of power that he wants to exert. Because like you said, nobody else could do it. No other candidate, no other person in politics now could do that kind of stuff that he's getting away with.
Yeah.
And it's because he's Trump.
Well, and it's because so for the longest time there's been gaps, right? There's been gray area. And so the powers that be, whether they're Democrat or Republican, knew that you don't mess with these gray areas. But the thing is that the true powers that be, right? We're considered an oligarchy. We have been for decades.
Yes.
So,
if not longer.
those are the true powers, right? So they are the ones who are like, well, we don't mess with the gray area, but there's been this push for different initiatives. And under traditional politicians, like you could chip away at that agenda, but it would you're playing the long game with it, right? But then enter some hard rights Christian nationalist oligarchs, and you get Project 2025, and they are using him as a tool to just dismantle all this stuff. And they're trying to appeal to people by saying, oh, well, states' rights, like we're going to push this stuff back to the states. But the hiccup comes in when you're cutting taxes, right? So Florida just did this where they got rid of all kinds of different types of taxes. And they're relying solely on tourism money to come in and like boost their economy and all this type of stuff.
Wow.
But you're increasing.
Don't they have like a lot of influx? Like, don't they have a lot of extra, however you'd put it?
Florida? No,
that's what I heard.
There's only a handful of states that actually pay a surplus in to the federal government, where every other state draws from the federal government. So we all pay our federal taxes and stuff like that, but the two major ones are California and New York. So they pay into the federal system more than they take out. And one of the primary reasons why they take out is for FEMA related stuff, like if they get hit with fires or hurricanes, stuff like that. A lot of states do that where they'll pay in, but they get a certain amount back. So I don't know. Ours is a bit of an oddity because we get a ton of federal funding because of the bases that we have here and research institutions that we have here. So we get a ton of federal funding already. So I don't know how. I haven't looked at any data sheets to break that down versus like looking at how much we put in, because we're obviously going to take out way more federal dollars than we put in because we're getting tons of federal money from the structures that we have here. But yeah, so if you're
that's interesting because I remember not too long ago. I'm sorry to get back to the Florida thing.
Yeah.
But if they're going to solely rely on tourists, I mean, yeah, they got Disney, right, and all that goes with it. But wasn't DeSantis just trying to sue Disney, or Disney sued Florida not that long ago about some issues? So it almost sounds like it's getting set up to where they're totally relying on tourism, and then that tourism is just going to go away.
So they're doing a lot of pandering. So they're trying to pander to, they believe this because they're close to the Bible Belt. And so they're doing a lot of pandering to that. So just a few years ago, they had passed a law saying any citizen anywhere in the state can make a complaint to school board of directors, library, like what are in their schools or in the public library. Okay. And so it actually went sideways very quickly, where people from not even those school districts were like going on, because then they were mandated to put the books on a website so people could go on there and see the books. And there was there's a piece that was done on it. I think the Daily Show did a piece on it. DeSantis then walked it back, and they had to do some amendments to it to change it, because one individual had filed thousands and like tied everything up like in court, and he then admitted like he had never read the books, but there was also this Christian group that, and I say that lightly because I've found that a lot of groups that try to tie themselves to that particular faith, because we're in America, so that's the primary or dominant one, right? Like a lot of groups try to
For
say
now.
that they're Christian, but they're not actually Christian. They're not actually like following the beliefs of Jesus and the teachings.
Right.
And so they just, again, they're pandering, because they know that's, if they want to get something further ahead, they just latch onto that. And so they were basically sending out like emails saying, hey, if you see any of these books on these lists, just report these books and then, get rid of those books. But they wouldn't explain why. They wouldn't explain, what the book was about, nothing. And so there's people like that gentleman who would just get those email threads and be like, on it, and then just start,
Wow.
like
Okay.
harassing the school boards and stuff like that.
Dang.
So then they had to walk it back, and I don't know what it is now, but it's got limitations to it now because it went sideways like very quickly. So yeah, because
That's
they were
very
pandering.
interesting.
So
All right. That makes sense. I mean, that's what you do, right? You want people's votes. You got to be the good guy to some people, and you got to pander to get what you need from them. So, yeah, I get that.
yeah.
Wow. Stuff goes pretty deep.
But yeah, so like the whole pushing it to the states is going to be difficult though, because as we were just talking about, a lot of states take out more than they put in. So if you
Right.
start pushing a lot of the things that the federal government was supposed to be like an umbrella for, and then you start pushing all that back to the states, well, they already can't afford it. They're already in the red. So then you come up with the actual conspiracy of it is that they want to privatize everything, but they can't just come out and say that.
No.
So they use
So you
this.
make all the government systems fail.
Yes, you make it so you push all these responsibilities back to the states, which the vast majority of them, I believe like 45 or 46 out of them are in the red, like versus the other ones that put in more than they take out, and they're not going to be able to sustain like these programs. So it's then going to be these private companies who are going to be owned by, the BlackRocks and stuff like that, where they come in and they're like, well, we'll do it. Because like P&M is selling to BlackRock.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yep.
they're already making their moves.
I've heard they bought a lot of houses
Yeah.
in New Mexico too.
Houses, farmland, water rights
Yeah.
throughout the country, but yeah, New Mexico as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
say, yeah, it's going to be that way. You can't buy anything. You're going to rent because they're going to buy everything up. They bought what 60,000 homes, I think, just this year alone or this month alone or
I
something.
saw that
I saw a
post.
number.
Yeah, it was like
So I
50,000.
mean, and that's the purpose of it is so you don't own anything and you're renting everything, and they can charge what they want because they own it. And
right. Well, they can.
Yeah.
Well, the way that it works there is a big picture where they say we're going off of a market analysis. But if you control the market, well, then you can control like what shows up on that market, right?
You can
So
drive it up.
right, because if they were just to rig the market, there are regulations preventing that, but there's nothing preventing them from creating an LLC and then buying a bunch of homes and then doing it that way. So, and then we have a lot of, our country is based off of profit, right? And so this actually goes back to, I was actually just talking about this the other day, how, well, you guys are all aware of that CEO that was killed from United Healthcare, and then they immediately started approving all kinds of medical stuff that they normally would never approve. Did you see the follow-up story to that? Where the board, or the shareholders, the representation of the shareholders sued BlackRock. United Healthcare, because it's actually legal precedent in America that the shareholders come first. All the way to Chevy and Ford, or Dodge Ram. I can't remember which one was then, but like back in the 1920s. So Ford wanted to build a car that the American public could afford. So he was going to like make it very cost effective for the American public. Well,
Ford and General Motors, wouldn't it?
Yeah, whoever his competitor was took him to court and said that they would be doing their shareholders an injustice, and they ruled in favor of their competitor in the shareholders. So it is by law since the 1920s that if your company is once you go public and you have shareholders, like you can legally, you cannot legally do anything that would hurt their interests. So all of our healthcare
Oh, okay. I
companies,
get you now.
all of our care companies have shareholders. So none of them are going to do anything that is going to harm or hurt their shareholders that would actually be beneficial to us. So
So we're gonna go first. If when it comes down to us and them, it's gonna be us
yes.
every time.
So unless that
That is
changes,
insane.
and
I
we
didn't know
did
that was
attempt.
law.
Yeah, so I
Wow.
can go down these rabbit holes all the time. So
No, it's great.
we did attempt to change that. So after World War II, we created, so everyone's aware that, and I can't say it verbatim, but we have our Bill of Rights. Well, we created a second Bill of Rights, and after the end of World War II. So we voted, it was created here in America. We voted not to implement it. But it is implemented in the European Union, which is why they have all the rights that they have and guaranteed, like to healthcare, to education, to
Right.
housing.
Right.
That's based off of our second Bill of Rights that we wrote and we turned down here. And Japan also has that second Bill of Rights as well, but we don't have it because it
That
guarantees.
we wrote.
Right.
What's that?
That we wrote and we don't have.
Correct. It's a second Bill of Rights. And a lot of people don't know about it. I didn't know about it until I was doing my poli-sci degree. And then I was like, what? So yeah, it guaranteed access to housing, to healthcare, to food, to education. Like those were guaranteed rights. But there's
Everywhere
still
but here.
laws that we have in place that you could get punished if you're not like providing those things to your kids. But
Right.
there's no standard. Right? So if you're homeschooling, you can either be like amazing at it and have your kids outperform, or you could just be like, well, I didn't want to be bothered to get them ready for school and I don't want government snooping in my life. So I'm going to say I'm homeschooling them, but I'm actually not doing shit. And you're still not going to get in trouble. Right? So like,
that was like now homeschooling is becoming more acceptable or popular or not as negative from what I've seen. But back in the day, homeschooling was a very negative thing. It's like, oh, your parents abuse you. Oh, your parents are drug addicts or whatever reason that you're not coming to
yeah,
regular school. You know what I mean? Or they're really super strict, Christians or whatever faith, and they're not, they don't want you to like, see the color blue. So they're gonna homeschool you and
yeah.
keep you there. But right, it's always had a negative kind of thing to it. Whereas now I think it's getting a little more. I think people are understanding that the public education system isn't all that great for their kids either. So.
And I think that's by design. I think that eventually we will come full circle again because right now the private schools are where rich people want to send their kids to, so that way they're not around the public education system or poor people. Choose your pick.
Right.
I'm sure some of them it's a combo, some of them it's one or the other.
And they send them to a Montessori school, like a different kind of schooling as well, where they concentrate more on creativity and critical thinking, where the school system,
Depending on your
the
belief,
public
yeah.
school system isn't so much like that.
So it used to be, right? So, but we don't have the federal government's education department doesn't have like a very high bar, right? So they basically have pushed that to the states. And what happens is the state has their own Department of Education, and this differs. So every state has that, but then how they manage it, because again, the federal bar is incredibly low. Generally what happens is they give out a lot of federal funding for either like loans for government loans for higher education or for subsidies for different aspects of public education, but they don't actually set like a bar of like this is where kids should be at this grade or so on and so forth. So what ends up happening is it goes to the Department of Education per states, and then it then goes down to the school board districts to then determine what's going to be on their curriculum. That's why, like in Oklahoma, there a while ago, they had it where one central area of Oklahoma, not the whole state, but one central area, they decided on the curriculum they were going to use history books that said that Native Americans were not forced from their homes. They were asked to leave and they gently left. So they were repainting the whole thing as like, not a bad thing. But school boards then have a huge controlling over what's taught in schools. That's why in the Bible Belt you have abstinence only teaching when it comes to sex ed, and that's why you have some of the highest teen pregnancy rates in the nation in that zone,
That's
because
still the
they're
case.
controlled by.
Well, I guess nothing's changed.
Yeah. So, and similarly here, like if you have Christian-based schools, and keep in mind there's 144 denominations of Christianity.
Right.
So that's 144 different ways that people are reading the same text and agreeing or disagreeing. So, like for the people that want things based on Christianity, I hope yours is the one that wins, because if not, like you're going to get somebody else's version of Christianity, and it might not coincide with what your belief system is. So
and that's why you have those though, right? But you have that. You have a Baptist school, you have a Lutheran school, you have a Catholic school. You know what I mean? So you have that choice to follow whatever path you're currently on, or you can accept, okay, I can compromise. I'm not sending him to a Lutheran or a Catholic, but I can go to this Baptist.
Because there's definitely not
I'm okay with that.
Choices.
So, right. No, there isn't. Never will
be. Yeah. So eventually we're going to come back to full circle, because once we privatize the public education system, right, for the most part, like we'll have, some people still left in the education system, and we're already making moves to do that. Lobbying is, to me, a cancer, and so
absolutely.
Yeah, they've managed, to lobby the government because right now, like if you as a private citizen don't want your kid in a public school, and the bar for getting them out is actually pretty low, and you want to move them to a private school, then they take whatever tax funds, they do the calculation, and that money that would have gone to that public school now goes to the private school. It follows your kid to the private school. And so
that's a good thing.
That's yes and no. So that's less money that school gets. But the thing is private schools charge their own rate of tuition. So that money is probably only a drop in the bucket of what the actual cost is. Again, you can apply for grants and that type of stuff. But in the long run, my belief on what will happen, again, my belief is that we will eventually push all these kids into private school. That'll be the new thing. Of course, the government will have to subsidize it. So in essence, it will become like public education, because it's all tax dollars that are going to it. But what you're going to see is a branch break off of that, because the people who were the snobs kind of in the beginning, who put their kids in those schools for whatever reason before, because they didn't want them around these other education criteria and stuff, they're going to then break away from that one. And they're going to create a more elite private school. So that way they're away from these ones. And then we eventually come back full circle to public education.
So it's just a sick cycle that we're on. Just a constant
cycle. Everything is cyclical. So like
look at the privatization of prisons. I mean, now it's prison for profit. And so now we're going to have schools for profit. And the biggest thing is going to be.
Do you know how those prisons are set up? Like, that's a shame.
Horribly.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So the contracts are set up.
Some knowledge.
If you're the government and I'm coming to you and I'm like, hey, I'm going to set up a private prison, I'm going to charge you 70% capacity rate all year. Okay. Whether I'm at 30%, whether I'm at 10%, or whether. So if I go beyond
110%.
Well, if I'm at 100%, I'm going to charge you the 100% rate. But even in downtime, if I'm below 70, I'm still charging you 70%. And so what that does is that creates an incentive for you to get your money's worth. And so you're going to just fill the prison as much as you can, and they've already done studies on this where they've seen where these private prisons are at, there's higher incarceration rates for things that would normally just be like a slap on the wrist. You pay a fine, you get bail, or there is no bail. Like, so you can just get out, like, you just leave the courthouse. But then there's an increase where, like, no, we got to actually hold you. No precedent for it. Like, it never happened before. Like, you got a parking ticket, you can go, but then they're just like, oh, no, you might be a flight risk, so we got to put you in jail. So that way they can get their money's worth out of the private prison.
Which also makes sense now on why there's no programs or barely any programs for anybody getting out of prison to help them not go back. I mean, our recidivism rate in this country is ridiculous. It's like an open, like one of those, rotating doors, revolving doors. Yeah, I couldn't get the word. You know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like that. And it's okay, well, get out, but they're going to be right back. They're returning customers, so we're going to get paid for them again here in a little while. And so they've created returning customers just like any other industry has. Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I remember first time, I only have a bachelor's in psychology, dude, but I remember my first classes, it was a very introductory class to sociology. And when I found out that in this society, you need to have, it's planned out that you have homeless people, homeless, poor, impoverished people. Even if we're a country that, richest, most powerful country in the world, nobody should be poor. Even if that's the case, they're still designed to have poor people. And it's essentially to be the stick for the middle class to keep working. Whereas you got the elite, that's the carrot. You know what I mean? And so you're getting smacked by the poor and led by the carrot, and you're just stuck in the middle, just hamster wheeling it.
Well, that is how our economic system is designed. So there's going to be I don't believe, having a degree in economics, that we actually have figured out the system of the future, right? So in the past, the elites were the only ones who could read and write and that type of stuff, and the kids didn't really have to have jobs because they're kings or they're princesses or their parents are the dukes or something like that. So they could then do all of this artwork or something like that. They could do whatever they wanted to do, right? And so we're kind of approaching that, but on a mass scale. We have that potential. So the way I look at it is, the way I describe it is, you have to have seen two movies, right? So WALL-E, has everybody seen WALL-E? And then Elysium. You guys know Elysium?
Yep.
Can't say I've seen it.
So Elysium, in a nutshell, it's got Matt Damon in it. Then what happens is you have
Hunger Games. Hunger Games would be another one. I mean, it's up there. Elysium. If you don't know Elysium, you know Hunger Games, and it's kind of the similar, right?
Similar concept.
Without the games. Without the games.
Because the difference, well, the get rid of the games part, right? So Elysium is a good example only because you have robotics, right? So you have robotics, you have AI, and what you end up doing is the poor people stay on the planet's surface and they create more robots. They do a lot of things. But the rich elite have created an off-world planet, so that way they're not in the polluted atmosphere and the ground, because what they ended up doing is, essentially, you can surmise that they've deregulated everything, right? So that's why there's tons of pollution, because the water's bad, the ground is bad, everything's bad. But they're not there, so they really don't give a shit,
Right.
So that's kind of like the premise of Elysium, is that there's all these people on planet Earth, and the rich and elite are off planet, which they actually have. There's proposals to build an off-planet system. So just so you guys know.
What about tunnels?
Right.
Anyway, go ahead.
So what ends up happening is, you can either, for us, this is our future, one of these two paths. So we either, and actually, which is cool, because I've been saying this for years, and then I just saw a forum on this with economic advisor and Bernie Sanders, where somebody asked, like, with all this technology, we could be like WALL-E, where we just get to become lazy and we can just pursue whatever degrees or whatever pathways or passions we want, and they say the same thing I would say, which is, well, do you think our system is designed that way? And the answer is no, right? So we've been born and bred in America, at least, because I can't speak to other countries, I'm not from there, is that you have no purpose in life except to have a job and produce.
And consume.
And consume. And so like that's your purpose. And so we're going to have a huge culture shock here in America when AI and robotics, because I don't know how much you guys follow this stuff. I love it, so I follow it. But we've pushed back on robotics for decades.
Right.
So they've been having these conversations in Congress decades ago, and they've been implementing laws tucked into other laws that push back any type of automation. So just last year, there was a huge strike in New Jersey, where dock workers went on strike. And so they did not offload the ship at all. And they got it written into their contract that the company that they worked for, because they were a union, could not automize anything until for at least a decade. So no further beyond what they've done, because our culture is that we have to have our purpose is to be a cog in the machine. And if we can't be the cog, be a cog in the machine, like what do we do? Because that's just been what's ingrained in us. And so right now we're doing this push for automation, we're doing a push for AI. And so unless
Amazon's
we're
doing
gonna,
it.
unless we're gonna do, and I said this a decade ago, and it would have been more practical then. Not really, but like unless we're gonna do pull a page out of the Amish playbook where we're just like we're done advancing technology. The hiccup is we've had this technology for automation and AI coming in and replacing stuff for probably like a decade. We just haven't done it. Other countries are surpassing us on this. And so like in Japan, in South Korea, like they have these robots, humanoid robots that they use in nursing homes and hospitals to pick up patients. So that way people don't hurt their backs, the patient doesn't get hurt. Like this is old technology for them. It's not even a thing here. And we're supposed to be the most advanced country on the planet. So but what we are is profit driven. So like why would we and there's a balance there, right? So because if you have people who can't, it's all connected, by the way. This is why I'm jumping around here. Is
No,
that
that's fine.
if you can't have people connect if you can't have people make ends meet and they don't have purpose, whether that's through they're consuming entertainment or they have some side job, like if they don't have a way to make ends meet, you're priming yourself for a civil war. That's why you'll never see the end to welfare benefits. That's why during COVID they did all those stimulus checks, is because they know that. The greatest example of that is when the USSR collapsed and then Russia was born. The Soviet Union collapsed in 91 and they climbed out of that very quickly because they ended up creating a national police force. Now, whether or not you agree with the national police force is irrelevant, because what they were attempting to do is give everyone a purpose and a way to make ends meet. They were able to take care of their families.
Oh, okay.
Because the study is that if you have a population of males, you can now include probably women in that as well, because you have a lot of women who are in the workforce and sole earners as well, from the ages of 19 to 30, who don't have a way to, make ends meet. You're priming yourself for a civil war. And so you don't want that. So you'll always have welfare. We have different levels of welfare here in America because there's numerous corporations that underpay their employees. So because that's the whole weird thing right now where they're like, we want to make sure people have jobs and get off of welfare. The vast majority of the recipients of welfare have jobs.
Yep. Absolutely true.
And the welfare is because they're not getting paid enough by the corporations. So, like this law.
Well, and that's the thing. They set the limit of what you can make to get that welfare. And then they set the minimum wage or whatever wage, you know what I mean? It's like it kind of works in tandem. Like Walmart's one of our biggest employers, and maybe you're trying to avoid names. And I'm sure they're not the only ones, but they're one of the biggest employers in our country, and they pay some of the crappiest wages until you get into management. Then when I hear it, once you're in management, it's like a wonderful place to work for. But until that point, you're part-time. And they're the biggest employer. So at these small towns, that's all they have, they're going to hire them at these low rates, and then they need to get subsidized by the federal government because they're not making enough to live on.
Right.
It's just, it's a weird.
And we got to see where we go with the technology, because they have already been working on robotics to stock shelves. So,
Right.
having your shelf stockers, Amazon already uses them in warehouses to go deliver and collect packages off of different shelving. So, and they've just ramped up to do even more. So it really, we need to focus on our nation, where how are we going to address this? And some people are talking about it in Congress, not enough. Is we need to figure out what our plans are, because with more robotics entering the workforce and um, AI being able to power those robotics, like we're going to see that there isn't going to be a need for humans to be involved. And so, what are we going to do? Because we've been programmed for so long, for generations, that our sole purpose is to provide and to consume. And if we're not, and they have a word for it, it's universal income, right? So if we're
Right.
not going to be given a universal income, then what are we going to do? But the universal income idea goes completely against, this capitalistic idea.
Yep.
But you can frame it within capitalism that it's a benefit, because you then have to do a trade-off, and they do these trade-offs all the time. So we can frame it as, like, this is why the federal government, hires private contractors to go overseas a lot more, instead of sending us. Like when I was deployed, doing fuel and oil and various other things, like there was a civilian counterpart that did the same stuff, through Halliburton or, Blackwater or something like that, one of those nefarious groups. And they paid them a lot more because they didn't have to give them benefits. They didn't have to pay spouses. They didn't have to, so that's why they'd give them a larger amount, but they didn't, if they got injured, it was on them, versus
They
myself.
paid less in the long run.
Exactly. But for me, like as a veteran, I have lifelong benefits, and some of those I can transfer to my kids, so that's a huge
Awesome.
cost, right? So if you're trying to privatize stuff, like because they already have gotten rid of unions. Some unions kind of overdid things, but a lot of unions were really good. That's how we got the 40-hour work week. That's how we got like child safety labor laws, stuff like that. But like if you're trying to privatize and you're weighing on whether or not we're going to move towards a universal income, you have to do that calculation. Like if I have human workers, I got to pay benefits, I got to pay some type of retirement, like I got to do all this money, or I just pay them this they get this one monthly amount, right? Like, and how that's set up, where all these conglomerates, like work together and give the government money to give to us, no one knows. Like, we're not really exploring that. But I think that's closer on the horizon than people realize, because
So that brings my question to, we already have what?
We already have the technology. Like, so
Right.
I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but probably like 15 years ago now, it was proposed, and I knew somebody that was actually working on some of the stuff for it. I'll just say that. They had like $1 billion city in southern New Mexico that was going to be 100% automated. And then all of a sudden it just like ceased to exist. It said that the plans fell through and it never happened, right? But they were working on this technology to have a small scale city that was going to be 100% automated. Cars, ambulances, lights, they all communicated together. And I knew somebody that was working on that technology where, like, so if you pulled up to, like, you'd integrate it into all your city, your street, so that if, an ambulance switched on, like, it would then send out these sensors where basically it would give all green lights to that ambulance and then give red lights for all the other ways of traffic. So that way you wouldn't have to sit there and pause and then like look both ways and all this type of stuff. It would just automatically read that first responders needed to get there, and it would direct it as so.
So is that
Like
where the
hive mind
term
esque.
smart city has come
Yeah,
from?
yeah. What's that?
Is that where the term smart cities come from?
I don't know if it comes from there or if that just comes from science fiction, because science fiction writers have been writing about this stuff for, a century.
Right.
So,
Well, yeah, and that's Project 2030, right? Like smart cities, and you're not going to own anything. Everything's going to be rented, and that's the whole. And between now and then, there's going to be like a big old war, or something's going to happen where huge population is destroyed, and all the lizard people are going to come from underground and do all that,
well,
and do all this stuff.
there is a cabal that is working on all this stuff. They've changed their name, but they're now known as the World Economic Forum. So they're fancy and everything. They're the 40, unless the numbers change. It's been a while since I've looked into them, but they are the first. This is what they are first. They're the 40 richest families in the world.
Families.
Okay. And then families.
Not states, not cities,
not nations,
not rulers.
Right.
Families. Okay.
So the 40 richest families in the world, and then they invite the heads of government to these World Economic Forums, so they can basically, these families tell them, how the next 10 years is going to go,
right.
where they see
they're the ones that control the finances.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and they're not shy about it. They're not as loud as they used to be about it, because with more technology and more cameras being on them, it used to be even Fox News and MSNBC, back when I first heard about it, they would be out there with cameras, because we'd have the president there, we'd have members of Congress there at this World Economic Forum, and they'd be coming to you live from Davos, and it's in some huge mansion and everything. And it used to be, they used to be really glamorous with it, but then when they got tons of attention, it's now been played back. So now when they talk about the World Economic Forum, it's not in that same light that it was 15 years ago. So now it's just oh yeah,
more subdued.
And it's okay.
They always have protests.
Yeah.
From what I recall, seeing in the news, there were always protests at the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, as it should be, because it's one of those things where it's painted as something rosy. Hey, we're all coming together. We're families just like you guys. It's well, right, but you guys, 40 families, because they have more wealth than the entire planet combined. So you take those 40 families, and then you take, estimate what? A couple generations worth. So you're sitting at maybe 200 people within those 40 families. And there's 8 billion people on the planet, and they have more wealth than the rest of the world combined. They have more wealth than nations, so yeah, so it's just insane.
It really is. And yeah, that's interesting, because I always thought it was maybe just a handful of families. I didn't know there was that many of them.
Well, it used to be. I'll have to look that up again. Like I said, I'll put together all these, everything I've touched on. I'll give you guys links for it, so that way you guys can put it with your description.
Sounds good.
Right on. All right. Well, I think that's a good spot to wind the show down. And once again, I hope you all enjoyed this. This was one of our longest ones yet, and definitely very interesting. So I look forward to another show that Tom's going to be able to join us. He said he would already. So we're going to look forward to that in the future. But Tom, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time. And glad you and Anthony, I'm glad we could all accommodate the time change and get this taken care of. So,
yeah.
Absolutely.
It was great conversing with you.
Doing it again.
Yeah, thank you guys. I love talking about this.
Joining us.
Yeah, me too. I love learning this stuff, because it's I knew it. I was oh, I didn't know that. And then it's oh, yeah. So it's kind of like a little roller coaster.
Some affirmation in there.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. And Tom, I'll see you on. We need to exchange numbers or something, maybe a little bit more than just Instagram.
Yeah. I'll text you my number.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Have a good night. Thank you for
watching
Stream Minds One Mike.